Good evening. This is J.R. Banks, also known as No Nonsense One 2017, and the author of the upcoming book, I'm Black, I'm Republican, So What? I have often been asked by curious and well-meaning friends and family, Jackie, why do you support the Republican Party? That party of white, racist bigots. Well, to those who feel like that, I have done my research. First of all, that was not the party of the white racist bigots. The white racist bigots were an outgrowth of the Democratic Party. I did my research and I had to, really question, why is it that we as a people who say we should know our history just blindly support this Democratic Party? Well, in doing my research, I found out that the Democratic Party, which was founded in 1792, split over the slavery issue during the 1860 presidential convention, which was the eve of the civil rights, the Civil War, excuse me, not civil rights, Civil War. Okay? Now, after the Civil War, most of the white Southerners opposed radical Reconstruction and the Republican Party's support of black and civil and political rights. And as a matter of fact, the Democrats were such a racist party that Southern whites defined the Democratic Party, as the white man's party, and sarcastically referred to the Republican Party as, quote, Negro dominated. And the dominance of the success of such racist thought can be traced to the Democratic victories in the South, where many Southern congressmen and senators were almost automatically re-elected every election. And since seniority was important in the U.S. Congress, the Southerners were able to control most of the committees in both houses of Congress and kill any civil rights legislation. And so by 1877, the Democratic Party controlled every Southern state and remained that way until the civil rights movement in the 1860s. Now, I know some of you are going to run and say, well, the Democrats were different in the North, and of course, praise FDR's New Deal. However, FDR rarely challenged the powerfully entrenched Southern bloc. And when the House, this is important, when the House passed a federal anti-lynching bill several times in the 1930s, Southern senators filibustered it to death. And we know the horrors of lynching. And even though the House had passed an anti-lynching bill, the Southern senators filibustered that bill to death. And think of all the precious blacks, especially black men, who died brutally and horribly in the South. Now, we need to remember one thing, which is never mentioned during Black History Month. Much as we give praise to Dr. King, how many people actually hear or know? And a lot of people know, but hey, I'm going to just say it. It makes me feel good to say it, and it's a fact. We had a black Republican minister spearhead the civil rights movement. And with all the mudslinging of Republicans by the uninformed, really, it is never mentioned. I've been to enough Black History Month celebrations. Never do I see it in print or spoken that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and indeed the King family are Republicans to this day. As a matter of fact, Dr. Alveda King, his niece, is a staunch pro-life supporter. And this year she is leading the International March for Life to be held this Saturday, March 25th, in downtown Manhattan. This party, which so many African Americans repudiate, is the party of life for the unborn. And speaking of Black Lives Matter, why aren't they supporting life before birth? They have it all twisted, talking about a woman's right to choose, calling abortion reproductive health. I don't know how killing is considered health, but by some it is. And as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of when I went to CPAC this past February. I remember seeing that film on Dr. Kermit Gosnell, an African American doctor who ran a filthy, disgusting abortion clinic in Philadelphia. He eventually was convicted of manslaughter, and just the horrible description of how he killed the babies that were born alive during the course of an abortion. It is just so gross. And I can't help but thinking of the late Margaret Sanger, who is praised in the liberal leftist public schools as someone who is pro-choice. That's the word they use, pro-choice. But Margaret Sanger was known to hate African American people. She believed in sterilization. She was the founder of eugenics, believed in killing so-called inferior people. And she even had a project called the Negro Project to basically eliminate as much as possible the black population. And she was a good Democrat, by the way. You know, I'm thinking of Willie Lynch with that Willie Lynch letter. I can't help but thinking, hey, Willie Lynch would have loved someone like Kermit Gosnell. For those who don't know, I think most people watching this video know who Willie Lynch is. But Willie Lynch, for those who may not know, was a British slaveholder who taught the slave owners how to psychologically incapacitate the slaves to make them useful to their owners and dysfunctional towards each other, using all kinds of horrible physical and emotional torment to make them compliant. And they would be useful to the slave owner and just divided among each other. Well, Willie Lynch would have loved a man like Kermit Gosnell. And, you know, it just goes on and on. I can't help but notice how the hatred in the media. We have a Democratic-controlled left-wing media that absolutely hates the platform of the Republican Party. Today's Republican Party is pro-life, for the unborn. The Republican Party today is for small, limited government, as is found in our nation's Constitution. Hey, don't you get tired of seeing so much of your income go to the federal government? Don't you get tired of being told, oh, how to live, how to raise your children? I mean, the loving Democrats, don't spank your kid, spank Johnny's hand. Hey, end up getting your children taken from you. All these crazy ideas to have people socially compliant. This isn't something that is by the Republican Party. That's by the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, and I'm not saying any party is perfect, but the platform at least, pro-life, pro-family, and yes, marriage as a covenant between a man and a woman. Yes, I say all this and I'm not ashamed. We have to stand for truth. It's time to stand for life, for truth, and let people be who they are. Hey, while we stand for things, we're not forcing anybody to follow a certain platform. but just to have the right to speak one's idea. Ideology, if you could have one ideology, if we're going to live in a free country, ideologies have to be allowed to be spoken, not calling people haters because they don't agree with you. Let's just stand. Let's just stand for truth. And I know this, love me or not, I love you, but I'm still black. I'm Republican. Don't like it. Hey, so what? Have a good evening.